Ether Files.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Ether Files. Today we will talk about magic. We have Nick Farrell from Italy. He's writer and creator of the Golden Dawn Temple Tarot.
Ether Files.
Okay, Nick, when was the first time you became interested in esotericism and magic?
I first became interested in magic by mistake. When I was 3, I had a long series of really bad dreams before I went to sleep. Every night I could see shapes moving in the room, and these shapes formed beings, and they terrified me. I was completely and utterly petrified. What I did was, I used to always sleep with the nightlight on, and this carried on right up until through my teens, and eventually they stopped when I started doing magic. What I realized now was this was an early uncontrolled manifestation of my own psychic powers. And as a kid, I didn't know what I was seeing, but what I was seeing were things that were connected to magical experiences as I came to understand them later. I initially started out as a born-again Christian, and that ultimately didn't answer what I was looking for. But I found a book by Francis King, a picture book on magic, and something about the symbols and the iconography of what was then 20th century magic seemed to resonate with me and cause me to study it a lot more. I was really lucky. I found a basic school quite quickly, and from there went on to meet people who were really good magicians and become trained.
Okay, and what definition do you give to magic, and how is it related to science, for example?
Magic has no definition. Various attempts have been made to have a really useful definition that people can use. There's even a huge book that's just dedicated to defining magic for sociologists and people like that. And it doesn't come to a conclusion really either. Part of the problem is that magic means something different to everybody who's using it. The ancient Egyptians, for example, considered magic the force that was behind the creation of the universe. So it becomes a thing that can be contacted, a god that can be contacted and talked to and used. In my earlier books, I described magic as the art of becoming a co-creator with God, which basically means that you are trying to change your universe by using divine powers or your own divine aspects. It's not the greatest of definitions. As I've got older and more experienced, I realize that sometimes it isn't that at all. I think when you are playing with esoteric forces, you tend to think some things are magical when they're not, and other things aren't magical when they are. I mean, Aleister Crowley, for example, his definition was the art of magic is the art of transforming consciousness. Yeah, that's not a bad definition in some ways, because magic involves transforming consciousness. You have to transform your consciousness to access magic, but it's not the actual act of changing consciousness. Otherwise, sleeping would be a magical act, and it clearly isn't, because there is no question of you transforming anything. So it's not a satisfactory answer. When you ask what's it got to do with science, I don't think it has much to do with science at all. Modern occultists have done their level best to try and make magic fit with science and scientific theories, and I've never been entirely satisfied with the results. Magic is a sort of science, but it's a personal science. It disobeys the rules of scientific law, because a ritual for magic to be scientific, it would need to be repeatable. A person would do one thing, and it would always get the same result.
Yes.
If it didn't get the same result, then it doesn't uphold scientific theory. And I have done 10 rituals. If I've done 10 rituals, and 2 of them don't work, or don't get a result the way I wanted to, then it proves that it can't follow scientific theory. But if I'm doing 10 rituals and I have an 80% success rate as a magician, I think that's pretty damn impressive. So, no, I think the 2 approaches to reality are different. You can use some of the scientific techniques or ideas or methods, but it's really just window dressing for something that is completely and utterly irrational.
Yes. Today there are many theories of psychology. What is the relation that you find between magic and current psychology? Israel Regardie mentions Carl Jung in his books, for example.
Psychology entered magic probably in the 1940s, around the time of Dion Fortune. Israel Regardie was hugely influenced by it. And what psychology offers is a way of understanding the processes of the mind when you're doing magic. Regardie, for example, thought that everybody should be analysed before they did magical work, so that they could actually understand the processes that the forces were having on their minds and their personalities, and also to balance people, because most occultists are pretty unbalanced sorts. I think the problem came in the 1970s when psychology became far too dominant in magic. You see people describing things entirely in psychological terms. So, for example, if I summon a spirit of Mercury, it's supposed to be a subjective, entirely subjective psychological process of me interacting with that being. And it's not true. It's a spirit of Mercury. It is a spirit of Mercury. How I react to it is my psychological state, but the spirit is still a spirit. It's like saying your mother is a manifestation of your personality. And I think it got ridiculous within magic, and to the point where people started saying, the entire universe, my entire universe, is all in my mind, and anything I do is a psychological reaction to that. And I think that's gone far too far in the other direction. So I do believe, and I do use fairly psychological approaches, but only in as much as I'm trying to understand the relationship between these spirits and the magical universe and myself. So say, for example, I do a ritual for a ritual initiation to Hecate, and the person I'm initiating will have a psychological effect and in their life. So I have to, as a teacher, work out what that might be. And for example, in the case of Hecate, we find that I initiate a lot of Italian men, and they have huge mother problems. So they have bad dreams, they have all these sorts of psychological events which are connected to them being wired up to that particular spirit. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't mean that the spirit is a psychological manifestation of them, it's just their reaction to it. So what we use psychology for is more of a diagnostic tool rather than believing that it all took place in our minds.
Ether Files.
You wrote some books on the relation of magic to imagination and creative visualization, how magical imagination decays to magic, for example. What is the relation between magic and creative visualization, imagination, and the astral world?
I wrote a book called Magical Imagination. I wrote it now nearly 25 years ago. And the book was summing up my magical use of imagination, and psychism and pathworking and stuff like that. And particularly I was interested in using it to heal psychological trauma. But it is a mistake to believe that what I talk about is the creative visualization of the New Age movement, because I don't believe that that is a valid form of magic. The New Age movement says that if you imagine something and you desire it, it will be drawn to you. And that I have proven does not work, because, well, it doesn't. You can see a lot of people saying, I visualize this, I would want this badly, and they're never getting it. And then the New Age movement comes up with lots of psychological reasons as to why that's not the case. The magical approach goes back to the 19th century, which is using a concept of the aura, which is called the sphere of sensation. That was the original thing. It was like a bubble around, a bubble of energy around each person. Yes. And you can change your, is a reflection of your universe. It's a cross between psychological and otherwise, but it's a reflection of your universe.
Yes.
And by visualizing something, you're projecting onto that sphere of sensation. And that is literally bringing something into your universe, your personal universe. However, the rules that apply to the sphere of sensation are slightly different from the creative visualization movement. The creative visualization movement says if I visualize it, it's there forever. The sphere of sensation stuff says no, these images fade if they're not compatible with the rest of your universe. So if you are busy visualizing for love and you hate everybody, your sphere of sensation is going to see the symbol for a moment and slowly erase it. And what we do with ritual and what we do with pathworking and other symbols is we're trying to make those symbols last long enough to affect changes in the sphere of sensation over a longer period of time. So what we use is a concept called pathworking, which is the most simple one, which is effectively a narrated story in a semi-hypnotic state, and where a person can understand and interact with those forces within their sphere of sensation. that is much better than trying to impose. So creative visualization says you visualize something and you're literally imposing that symbol on your sphere of sensation. If you're not doing anything else, then it will fade. Path working takes you into your sphere of sensation and introduces the symbol more gently, and you can see how it interacts with your sphere of sensation, with your own inner kingdom, your own inner universe, and you can make it work for you. So say, for example, I'm path working and I want to understand why I cannot express love properly. So I will create an inner landscape, enter into that inner landscape with the intention of understanding why I am not expressing love properly. I will find myself in a landscape which is appropriate to that question, because that's how the sphere of sensation works. And I will be able to see what's either causing the problem, or through a path working, if a person's reading the path working, they can place a symbol in there and see how it works. So, for example, I have a path working to King Arthur's round table. And in King Arthur's round table, you have the 12 aspects, 12 knights, and Arthur under control of King Arthur, who's the higher self. And each of these 12 knights represent the 12 stations of the zodiac and represent the areas. They're each in charge of the areas of my life. So I go into path working, I place a symbol of my heart, say, if we're talking about a love thing, in front of the knight in charge of the 5th house. And I can talk to them about why I'm not expressing love properly. And by naturally working within the sphere of sensation, you can come up with clearer answers about what the problems are, and it's less likely to be wiped. And in fact, it can be quite intense. The fallout from these sorts of path workings lasts for a long time. And I know this for a fact because I made a huge mistake working with what I called psychological magic to try and transform various aspects of my personality. And I was so into this. I was doing these path workings every 3 or 4 days to try and understand what I was doing. And I was fixing things, and the whole of my life collapsed, because your sphere of sensation is carefully built by you over all your life. So if you change things, you can make, even in a small way, you can totally destroy your existing life. So now when I do it, I'm a little more careful, and the results are a lot more useful, and that's what ended up in the book.
Wow, very interesting. What is the function of the symbol in magic, and how is it related to the